Welcome to the LifePro podcast, where today I have the pleasure of having Alessandra Veronesi, who is the CEO and founder of Holy Shiver. Today's topic is elevate your relationships. But before we get into that, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Thank you for taking the
Life
time
is
with
good.
us. Your life is great. And speaking of your life, why don't you give us a little synopsis, a little peek into the journey of your life and what you've been through to bring you to today.
Sure. Yeah. So my story, which is just a story really, now that I look back and feel like I've done a huge change in how I see the world. I started off as working in corporate finance, corporate environments, insurance. I got an MBA. I followed that path, basically the tried and true, and nothing wrong with it. Very much had great memories, good times with my coworkers. But ultimately, where this all led me to was at finding myself during COVID. And so I would say my life really took a turn for the better. Initially, the worst, as tends to happen. Path of most resistance leads to the path of least resistance. And when everybody was forced to slow down, I was not an exception to that. And I discovered meditation, which then led me to really understanding myself in such a different, more profound way, which led me to write a book about new, different perspectives on life, which were much more pleasant, should I say, in terms of how to process the world, and as well as a series of meditations that I was sharing initially with just close friends and friends of friends, and then they became more widespread and led me down this journey of basically today. I do what I can to help others remember the light that they have inside and really connecting into themselves so that they can lead their own highest expression of their truth.
Great. So tell us a little bit more about your book. Unpeel Yourself and Elevate Your Relationships is what it's called, right?
Yeah, it's called A New Banana.
A New Banana.
uh, a New Banana, and then unpeel yourself and elevate your relationships. And because really, when you go through a process of reassessing what it means to be you and your happiness and all of these external things, constituents that make up life, really truly don't matter. It's all about unpeeling those layers and finding who are you at your core before there was conditioning, even from well-intentioned surroundings that raised you. And it's beautiful to have cultures and food, and that's why we're human, and like family time, but everybody is a little bit influenced by their previous generation, and whatever the context is that they're living in geographically has an influence. And sometimes we don't realize, and me for one, I speak from experience, sometimes we don't realize that maybe we've taken choices in our life that were not so much in alignment with who we want to be, and then we don't ever stop to question why it is that we don't feel so good, or why we feel anxious, or why we might feel a void inside because things around us seem to be perfect, or we have all of the material necessities and we have our lives going. So it's really, the point of the book is to understand that you got to peel off all those layers, get to know yourself, and then process relationships perhaps from this neutral space. And then maybe you would find out that you're exactly where you're meant to be. And that's the best part. You come full circle. But in the process of that journey of discovering who you are in life, I think it's very important to be able to let go of as many things, layers as possible, so that life can truly be lived directly in the present moment.
So when you say that, you're speaking to peeling all the negativity and all of our bad experiences and just letting go. Is that what, or all the
Sure, that
negative
could be one.
influences?
That's one interpretation, of course, like releasing negative energy that sometimes
Right.
gets attached to us
So,
throughout our lives. Um, but also, say for example, I know to go into dentistry, it's like, I think I have a friend, it's like $600,000 of debt to go into dentistry. But you're buying yourself somewhat of a guaranteed future, assuming that you more or less like it. And then, then you spend all this money, you go into this line of work, perhaps because someone in your family wanted you to go into some type of a medical industry. And you don't really ask yourself like what drove you to do that. You just knew that at some point you wanted to then maybe get a house and put a mortgage down. And then so you end up in these lines of choices in your whole life. And again, like maybe you would have done that anyway,
mm,
but the things that drove you to make these choices in life were a little bit more passive than they were um, actually you wanting to maybe do that. So the idea is like just sort of taking a good look at what makes us who we are,
mm,
and um and understanding, okay, so all of these things that are happening around me, it's okay if I don't like them. It's a good starting point. It's okay to admit that maybe right now I'm dissatisfied, because that's an important piece of the puzzle nonetheless. And it's not, you don't have to be stuck there. You don't have to ignore it. Actually, you need to let it breathe. Again, releasing things and letting them go. Um, and and then from a from that place of wholeness, from understanding,
mm.
then choosing, what your choices are. Ideally, like not after you've already, ideally a person would still go through with their career choice
Yeah.
after they've made that investment. But at least they would have like a general idea of like what might be healthy or not from what's coming out from other people as well. So the whole point is just to be connected to who you are in
Yeah.
your core, and making all your choices from that place.
And
And
you do that through meditation and being aware and cautious of how you're feeling and
you
being
can,
aware.
yes. Meditation is a great tool. It's what helped me um, really distinguish from all the noise, and find clarity in how I wanted to lead my life.
Mm,
There's also whatever brings some, I mean, working out, of course, but if it's whatever is bringing you to a place of stillness, as uncomfortable as it might feel initially. It could be plant medicine, it could be um, breath work, it could be
mm.
walking in nature, or even just conventional therapy, anything. If you're seeking,
Yeah.
answers will come to you from that place of openness.
Yeah, we've had an episode about flow, getting into the state of flow. So I would imagine that's very much in line with meditation and or whatever, doing whatever it takes to get to that point where everything just comes easily and flows.
Well, sure. Well, yeah, and I would say flow, and I talk about energy in the book. There's a chapter about, how energy can work sometimes, and like the laws of the universe and what we need to, so what it's interesting to observe how that flow can come together. And there is certainly a higher order at a universal level that's guiding the energies around us. And sometimes we notice that the day is quite intense and other people had the same experience, and we're like, what happened today? And you know who knows, but
Right.
something is going on at a greater level, planetarily speaking. But being in the flow also means like knowing, even feeling a lot more. So even things can be unpleasant, but they're warnings of sorts,
Mm,
or, understanding when it's time to take that wave and be productive, or when it's time to embrace like a moment of rest, or, when a particular relationship is not really working out and communication is not working, like don't try to drill a square peg in a round hole, or whatever the expression is, like
right.
just understanding when it's time, just being a little bit more light
Right.
in life, and understanding when it's time to exit a situation or approach one
Yeah.
without fear or ambition, just like the exact, just going along your way, and you have your mission and you keep going. So
Right. Right. So tell us why you decided to write this book and what you're hoping to achieve with it.
so the book kind of came through me. So I didn't actually decide to write it in a way. It was just inevitable at some point because I had written like 72 different meditations, which were more which had a lot of messages in them. So from those meditations, I extracted the I guess the nucleus of the book, and then I wrote around all
Mm.
of those observations that had come to me. But it was really a drive to share. It's kind of like if you have like an amazing meal and you want everybody else to try the same thing you just ate. So it was
Mm.
like I just found out these things. They
Every-
supremely helped me, and I'm just going to send them out there in case anybody else is experiencing similar discomforts and would like something to a new perspective to help them feel good.
Yeah.
And so that was the whole premise really that
Yeah.
started from there. It was just wanting to share some of these truths.
So elevating your relationships, which is, a big component of your book and our topic today. What is it? What does it mean to elevate your relationships? How do you define that?
Gosh, well, it means every relationship is performing at its highest good. So the interactions that you're having with people, maybe they have a purpose or an intention, and it doesn't have to be conscious.
Mm.
Um, and it can be as simple as making like generating loving feelings between each other, like such as what friends do unconditionally when they spend time.
Yeah.
Um, and it also means having the courage to take a good look at which ones maybe are draining you, because initially when we're having a shift and we're kind of reclaiming our authority and empowering ourselves and our individuality, sometimes there are relationships that come our way that are meant to teach us exactly that, to stand up for ourselves or to, you know, to not necessarily accept some treatments from others. So elevating relationships just means, and it means allowing everything that needs to drop if it's not benefiting you in a non-personal way, because ultimately the idea is you're doing that for others too. So we're all holding each other up. We're all um, elevating one another. So not resonating
Yeah.
in people's suffering. So sometimes, you know, it can be very tempting and it could feel like we're being a great friend if someone is really, really sad and we're like, yeah, this is horrible. Like, let's just cry together all day. But maybe really like a person does need to be listened. It's really
Yeah.
like great to be heard and seen when we need support. But maybe also what that person needs is for someone to once again show them that it's okay to expect good news and that it's okay um, to expect to be happy, because life is also not meant for just wallowing. So I would say elevating relationships is really just life is relationships with ourselves and with others, and we are mirrors, and you know, it's about making it as joyful as possible. We all exist in this
Yeah.
wonderful planet together, and so um, leading with that in
Yeah.
mind.
And I've always, and I through the years you learn, like, to focus on the relationships and friendships where we're elevating each other and moving away from more of the toxic relationships or friends that tend to bring you down. What are some tips and tricks you have for people to evaluate those relationships and understand, okay, well, maybe I'm not in the greatest relationship here, whether it's a friend or spouse or whatever, and figuring out ways to maybe uh, move away from those things.
Sure. Well, I guess it depends on you just mentioned some, depending on the relationship. So, I mean, if it's a friendship, it's very different than if it's maybe a spouse,
Right.
because, you know, there's shared assets and situations going on. Um, so, I mean, the first step, of course, is always to notice. And I think one of the most simple yet effective ways of understanding initially whether a relationship is um, in alignment, or that dynamic is in alignment, is really to observe yourself, and are you changing in any way uh, your personality
Mhm.
to fit into this relationship? And it can be as simple as not, not feeling like, oh, like this person needs me, I can't mention that I'm having a bad day also. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, you're both just as important. And if you're friends, there's no counting this, or with a spouse. So just noticing, okay, is my personality being altered in some kind of way? Am I unable to express that I would rather eat dinner over here? So then when you sense that there's that this, when you can finally notice it, acknowledging something is, the most important part really, because then it leads you to the path of what to do next. Um, then of course, like direct and honest, you're never going to regret being honest, because it will at least give that other person a chance to correct that behavior, because sometimes we fall into patterns, and for whatever reasons there was compatibility in that
Mm.
pattern. And of course sometimes we can mention it, and then the person will say, I had no idea, I didn't realize, like I just thought you were like kind of a person who likes to go with the flow, and I didn't know that you had your own needs, and I thought it was helping to give you these ways of doing things. And if the person instead becomes defensive, or doesn't want to go with it, then now you have more information, and now you have to, then you can kind of
Yeah.
question with yourself, like, what is it about this dynamic that attracted me in the first place? What is it inside of me that feels like it needs to be poured a little bit more love inside of? And um you know and then maybe, or maybe not, um for you may feel inclined to drift away from that particular relationship, and in exchange pull yourself up a little bit more, and
Yeah.
maybe not accept that kind of treatment in the future.
Right. So when it comes to friends, number of friends, let's discuss quality over quantity. I tend to be somebody that has a smaller group of friends. I'm more selective about who I surround myself with. And,
Mhm.
obviously I'm looking for things in common, common interests, more common morals, common values, and understanding. And obviously, I'm an entrepreneur, so I tend to get along more with people that are more business minded, or I'm a big fan of sports. So if there's that in common, but let's talk about that. Let's talk about like people's tendencies to, there's certain people that just want to have a lot of friends versus people that want to have just quality friends. And any advice for people in that regard?
Well, it's strictly a personal choice, I would say. What I have observed, I mean, as long as you are with yourself. So if you're capable, so I've observed sometimes people with lots and lots of friends, sometimes it's more like an avoidance from being alone with themselves. And then people who tend to have, I think I fall under the category of quality over quantity, but I do have many, I love people. So I have,
Yeah.
like, if I meet other souls, like in that moment of interaction, I'm very much like here and now, like.
Right in the
And
moment.
so there's high intensity of enjoyment in that interaction. So um there's really no wrong way to do it. It's about how much energy you have inside of
Well,
you
yeah,
to
I
give.
mean, and that would be my argument, right? Like we only have so much we can give. There's 24 hours in the day. We sleep for 8 hours. We work for 8 hours, and now we have 8 hours to distribute to others, whether it's a phone call or hanging out with them. And so I can argue that we can give more love to less people, or rather than less love to more people. So that's kind of the way that I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way. I think if people are able to handle nurturing many more friendships, and that's like a path that works for them,
Yeah.
then I'm sure in some way or another it all works itself out. um I think it's on the individual level, if that person is getting something from that as well, or are they seeking something through quantity that they might be better off giving themselves, and then um, not necessarily needing like many people's approval
Right.
to um, to feel good about their social interactions.
Right.
So the idea is, like, don't let anything compromise like your sense of freedom.
Mm.
So, and sometimes that happens. like with even the choices that we make in friendships. So sometimes, we are doing that for an ultimate purpose. Like we're heading out and we're going to socialize because we're hoping to get validation or approval, rather than I feel good. I actually feel I had a great day. I want to go share this with other people. And
Yeah.
tonight is like a perfect night for me to go out and I look forward to it. Whoever is there is meant to be, and we're going to have a great interaction, rather than I don't want to be home alone. I really want to go feel like I belong to something.
Mm.
And even though I might not necessarily get along with these people, like, because there's alcohol, we're gonna have fun anyway. Like that's a very different way to like make your choices. And there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with either one. It just becomes a little bit exhausting when you're choosing when you're giving something up in order to get something else, when ultimately all of those things you should already be giving yourself. So
Yeah.
um, I hope that made sense.
It did. It did. But going back to evaluating our relationships and meditation as a tool to get us to elevating our relationships, help me connect the dots there. Help me connect the dots from meditation and elevating our relationships.
Okay. So meditation gives you a chance to 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 really take away a lot of the clutter that goes on. And the minute you don't have enough time to meditate is actually the minute you really should meditate, because when you have that feeling that things are completely, you don't have time, you're catching up on all of these things, you're running on a hamster wheel, um, it really
Mm.
impacts and influences everything you approach from that kind of an energy, that scattered energy space. So when you find stillness within yourself, things around you also shift. Things around you find their place in a very different way than if you're trying to control things or be constantly like making sure that things are going in a certain direction or way. And that can also, and so that impacts wherever you need uh, some shifting or some higher wisdom. Like meditation will kind of trickle into those areas. So it's different from person to person. But when you're able to gain that clarity and perspective just from stepping back and stepping away from those thoughts and doing a bit of a reset, then priorities become clearer, and we do others a favor when we know what we want. We
Mm.
give people a chance to opt in or out. If we're just kind of living our lives like, okay, like what's every 10 minutes we were doing something on the calendar and it's nothing, and everything is kind of transactional, and like I got to call this person, I got to call that person, I got to go to dinner here, I got to do this, oh, I promised I would do that, and we never have a chance to really stop, um and think to ourselves, you know what, I actually don't feel like seeing this person for brunch. It's nothing wrong with it, I just don't feel like it. And honoring that, and maybe they also kind of were not in the mood either, and you free each other
Yeah.
from an obligation that who knows why both people felt, because maybe in both of your value systems it's like we would never cancel and we honor our commitment. Okay, but it's like, why are we sitting here and having brunch for 3 hours when we would rather be doing both of us other things? So
Yeah.
elevating, it just gives people space. You give people space to be exactly who they are, and ideally honestly, and like with
Yeah.
an open heart, and just kind of
Yeah.
giving everybody the room to be who they need to be. And it starts within. When you're able to do that for yourself,
Mm.
the way it comes out, um it's not like aggressive, it's not pushy, it's just I'm in this space, and I just want to give you the same respect to do the same, and we go from there.
Yeah. Like it comes down to using meditation to have a better relationship with yourself, understand yourself so that you can have a better relationship and elevate with others.
Right, exactly. I mean, when you understand yourself, you pretty much can understand, in a way, others, or at the very
Yeah.
least, you can have an idea of that, and that, as within, so without, as above, so below. Like,
Yeah.
everything is just a reflection of really who we are inside, and who we, and for better or worse. I mean, if we don't feel good, what happens around us? Things are not so nice.
We
If
push
we feel
those.
good, things are
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And that's the same also with relationships.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because we can't have a relationship with others unless we have a good relationship with ourselves. And a lot of these cues, whether it's body language or tone, come out. If we're feeling upset, like those come out in our tone, and affects other people through negative energy, and it becomes toxic. So really taking that time to reflect and think about how we're feeling, and it helps us get over whatever situations. And if, like you said, if you don't feel like going to dinner, then don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah,
Like, don't force yourself, because it's like the molds of society of having to do that. And then it'll affect your relationships. It'll affect your personal well-being. Um, what I found through the years is, obviously our relationships evolved based on the the point we are in our lives, right? Like the friends that I have now are not the same friends I had 20 years ago, and you lose friendships. So it's all, meeting the right people at the right time also is a component to friendship, like being able to elevate, like being at the right point and being at the right page sometimes in life. Because we can't be friends. I can't be friends with a 16-year-old, because we're not in the same wavelength. We're not in the same way, on the same page.
conventionally, yeah, conventionally, maybe not. I mean, and I energy. So I have a chapter on friendships and ending friendships, and like happy friendships, and a couple of other things about how some of these perspectives can be elaborated on. But the short answer is energy shifts,
Yeah.
like quickly, like really quickly. Like as soon as one little thing happens, and then 20 things free up, or, in
Yeah.
general, ways of seeing
Yeah.
energy. And again, like when friendships fade, or when they end, or things like that, it, maybe it's okay to be a little sad, of course. I've certainly had that.
Yeah.
But if you look at it from a higher perspective, you're like, well, maybe there was a purpose for that friendship, and it has concluded. And thank you to that person for coming into my life for all of these experiences. Now I'm different, I've changed, and now I am ready to have different friendships with different kinds of people. And I mean, ideally, it's like a influx, and it's not like you are totally out of friends and then one day you have one and then you don't. I mean, it happens sparingly, but it
Yeah.
over, the course of 30, 40, 50 years of life, like, of course, it's difficult to, and I'm still friends with friends that I knew when I was in elementary school. And it's, we laugh about, we're just totally different. I mean, we've just
Yeah.
gone two completely different directions. So our
Yeah.
bond is based on the years, not necessarily on shared interests or,
Yeah.
commonalities. They certainly don't meditate the way I do, or they haven't yet, um, learned about some of the concepts as in depth as I am in them. So, but that's okay. They're great people. Everybody's
Yeah.
is uh, is here for a reason.
Yeah. I had a situation. I mean, growing up with my best friend growing up in elementary school, um, we kind of lost touch somewhere around high school. And I always imagined like we'd always be friends. Like that's what you do as a kid. You're like, oh, we're best friends. We're always going to be friends. And we had a mutual friend that passed away about three years ago. And
Mm,
so we reconnected, just to talk about that. And I I realized like how different we are, and how different we are from when we were kids, and how different he is. And uh and I'm okay. It took me a while to like really understand like why we stopped being friends. Because now he has other priorities. I think he has like 5 kids now, and lives in Israel, and is
that's a lot
is
of
super
priorities.
super religious. And just he's a different person, and people evolved. And different points in our lives we require different things from friends and our relationships. So I think that
Absolutely.
plays a lot into, whatever the universe has in store for us. And like you said, there's reasons for moving on from toxic relationships. So you mentioned that a little bit. What advice do you have? Like, how do people find the courage to leave a toxic relationship or friendship
Or relationship.
or
I do
relationship?
go into that also in the book. There's a section on romantic relationships as well. And, toxic relationships. Um, I think we've maybe all of us have had a little bit of a flavor of that in dating. I mean, if we've dated more than one person. And so, I mean, the courage is understanding how I would say is, this is using words, so it's the mind, but I would say like you have to love yourself a little bit more than in the future than in the present. So you have to kind of get to a place where you see just like what an incredible person you are and what you deserve,
Mhm.
and then claim it. And of course, you're taking a step in the dark if it's a romantic relationship and you're afraid that maybe you'll be alone or things like, all those other attachment issues. But if you work on yourself and if you develop a relationship with yourself, it becomes easier and easier to leave them. It's difficult when it's the first situation that's happened in your life. Um, but at some point, you have to understand that if you're not, if this person is not making you feel good, although nobody's responsible for making us feel good, but they're certainly not entitled to making us feel bad. And whether or not there's even like ill intention behind someone's behavior, which could be deemed toxic, because very often people who are deemed toxic, it's not like they're like these villains in the world that are just like spreading toxic smoke on you. I mean, they're really suffering too. They have their own
Yeah.
slew of heavy situations that have led them to process the world in this way, and like have unhealthy patterns with and unhealthy boundaries. So understanding um, that you are only responsible for yourself, and if it's not feeling good, whether or not that person's doing it on purpose is not the issue. If you don't feel good with yourself in your body, and your nervous system is not feeling regulated, um, you're noticing that your own behavior is not something you're proud of. Maybe you're falling into traps as well, and like finding that you're yelling and arguing and screaming, or suddenly having these like really really heated um, arguments and disproportionately emotional conversations, then and it feels like a nightmare, then you don't need to stay in that kind of a situation. You don't owe um, that person, and certainly yourself, anything. I mean, you don't owe yourself that, and you don't owe that person anything. So um but the first step is difficult, but it's energetically very powerful when you do step away from something like that, as difficult as it can feel. Change doesn't feel always so good in the beginning, but it does bring rewards. So of course, seeking advice is always a nice a nice option if you do have friends where the people whose advice you cherish, and whose lives you look up to. I think that's
Yeah.
an important one. Like, take advice maybe from someone
Yeah.
who reflects um,
And
a
we've all
point of
been, sometimes we just saying it out loud helps us understand things. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, it really
yeah,
does. It like
repeating what's
think
happening.
thinking versus actually saying or writing things down like really helps us reflect on like, and a lot of times we come to those conclusions on our own by just, talking it through or like really conceptualizing the situation.
Exactly. um, and because really all of the interactions that we have around us are here to teach us something. If we haven't learned from that particular relationship that we need to stand up for ourselves, and that
Yeah.
whatever is happening in a toxic way is driving us to stand up and become empowered. I mean, eventually that might end somehow anyway. But if we didn't learn the lesson, the universe has an infinite amount of backup dancers for that play. So we're just going to get another person exactly the same, if not
Yeah.
worse, that's going to come in innocently enough. And that's, we might be repeating the pattern. So,
Yeah.
um, it just depends. Do you want to learn a new lesson or do you want to keep learning the same one? Because those are kind of the two options that you get.
Yeah. So
And yeah.
on the other side of toxic relationships are good relationships, right? So we've talked about the mindset of elevating your relationships, but how about the physical actions to elevate your relationships? I mean, off the top of my head, like I have certain people, I'm like, oh, I love that guy. I want to hang out with him more. I want to call him more, but I don't do it. Like, what can we do to elevate those relationships, like in the physical form?
Mm. Well, I would say, I mean, it's okay if you don't call someone often. I mean, it's all, again, you want to be totally true to yourself, and um in the same way that you wouldn't take it personally if some, or you shouldn't take it personally if someone doesn't call
Yeah.
you all the time. Like, nobody owes that to anybody. Um, I mean, in the physical world, I mean, I would say it depends on the person. Some friends I know really enjoy little gifts. So like sometimes
Yeah.
I bring a little gift with me, or I also enjoy that. So we do that for each other. Um, different ways of showing that they matter to us, and doing, sometimes favors that aren't weighing on us, but at the same time, we know that it would be such a big deal for them. And so
Yeah.
having the opportunity to step in and be there for these people is why we curate our relationships, so that we can have the space and the
Yeah.
time to then be, an exceptional lifeline to someone who might need one.
Yeah.
And so,
So it goes
um,
back to meditation, right? Like understanding the concept of time and being present, like understanding, well, if I'm booking my calendar with things every 10 minutes, I'm not allowing my time to work on myself. I'm not allowing time to like work on my relationship. So it comes down to balance, right? Like figuring out like maybe I'm overcome with too much on my plate, and I need to just kind of step back and focus on the things that are important.
yeah, I mean, the practice of meditation, the practice is a practice of life as well. So the way that you treat your time with yourself becomes a practice of how you treat your time for others, becomes a practice for how you treat your life in general. And so suddenly there's just this much more beautiful, peaceful boundary that comes into place. And and actually, we like that as human beings. Like, we like when there's a little bit of clarity and direction, and instead of just, trying to be this someone for everyone. And in that particular example, so it does really work as well as a life teacher, just understanding that taking a little bit of time can benefit you in ways that you don't necessarily directly see.
Yeah.
And and then on top of it, meditating in general calms you down. So now you are approaching things more calmly, checking in with your internal compass, if it's even interpreting it correctly, understanding from there. And so, minimizing action but maximizing effect.
Yeah. And you touched on one thing I want to talk about really quick is accepting yourself for who you are and what you want in life, and not influenced by what others want you to do. Same thing with friendships, right? Like building those friendships where the people accept you for who you are, and they don't try to make you somebody you're not, and you don't try to conform to what they want you to be. So it's acceptance of not only yourself, but that other people accept you for who you are. So I think that's important thing to realize when we're reflecting on our friendships and our relationships.
Absolutely. And that also comes from self-love. So if you find that you're surrounded by people who are constantly criticizing you or making you feel less than, then you have to ask yourself, like, what is it inside of me
Mm.
that has attracted this
This
reaction
person.
around me from others? And why is it triggering me? Because it's not that you don't meet people like that. I mean, of course, there are always different people on different walks in their path, and I still, but they drop off a lot more quickly
Yeah.
when you have that part inside of you that's whole. So It really all just comes from that self-love, and then
Right.
being able um, to expect the same in others, both towards yourself and towards them.
Yeah.
And then it's unconditional, because if you don't care that if you love yourself and you don't care that your hair is a mess, then you're not going to care that on another day that someone had a bad day, your friend or your partner looks like a mess, because whatever, we're friends, we're together, we there's love behind it, which is unconditional, because you've already been unconditional to yourself. So you're
Right.
not criticizing. Or if someone, sometimes like a partner will like just do something that's unattractive, like overeat or like whatever. But if we
Mm.
already are kind towards ourselves, and we know that this is just one side of us too, and it's not like we're perfect people, um, it doesn't have to impact like, and we don't need to have judgment towards that
Right.
situation, because instead we have acceptance as if we were having it towards ourselves.
Yeah. I love it. I think it all came full circle for me with this topic today. So I
Oh, good.
appreciate all of that.
Great.
That's really cool. So we're coming down to our last three questions I asked all of my guests. Life Pro podcast is the concept is there's a manual for everything in life except for life itself. So that's what we're trying to do here, is really teach people about different aspects of lives. And sometimes, you don't understand it until you have to deal with it. But having the information to get ahead of our relationships, and whether our relationships with ourselves and other people, is a big component of having a better life. So last three questions I ask everybody is, what is one thing you want to teach the world? Does not have to be related to the topic.
Be yourself and meditate. I'm literally teaching people to meditate.
Yeah, it's simple
So
as that. And you're making it simple, but it's like, it really comes down to that. Like, don't overcomplicate everything in life. Just be yourself and meditate and be aware, be conscious, listen to your intuition. Your intuition tells you the truth. And, sometimes we follow our heart and mind too much, and we need to listen to the intuition a little bit more, especially when it comes to friendships and relationships. Absolutely.
absolutely. Yeah.
Is there so I'm looking forward to unpeeling the banana and reading your book. Is there a book that maybe inspired you or changed the trajectory of your life?
The Alchemist.
Oh yeah, great book.
The Alchemist was just life altering for me to
Yeah,
read. And I read it at a time in my life when I was not so spiritually aware or connect, although we always are.
yeah,
I just was very, very, it was suppressed. And so it's always a valid book to read at any phase in life, but it does give that idea that
yeah,
it's there's room for magic, and it's good to also expect like magical things to happen around us. It doesn't all have to be,
yeah.
uh, you know, material, logical, and um, Excel files.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you and I had a very similar experience in life. I used to work in corporate life for a few years, and it took me a little bit of time to figure out, okay, this is not my path in life. And The Alchemist was also a book that I read when I was in a difficult point in my life, and it was a turning point for me as well. So it had the similar effect and really changed my view on life, and ways that really what you can accomplish. To set your mind to it. So we have that in common. So last question, how can people follow you?
Um, well, I'm on Instagram, Holy Shiver, so holy_shiver. And if people would like to, I'm actually launching probably next week or the one after. I have an Awaken the Inner Meditator course. And if people would like to sign up for my newsletter, it's on my website. And so that's holyshiver.com/coming soon is the direct link to signing up, but everything should be pretty visible on the site. And I also have 3 free guided meditations that anyone is welcome to download. And yeah, and then the audiobook is out as well. So there's a variety of sources that you can find a new banana.
Yeah.
And I think I also have YouTube. So just look for Holy Shiver, and I have some meditations on YouTube as well that are available. They're all pretty unique. So I'm told. So.
Great. Yeah, we'll make sure we put all that information in the show notes for everybody. I had so much fun talking to you today. You've definitely elevated my life, and
Oh, you
thank
too.
you for all the knowledge and everything you've taught me today. And it was a lot of fun.
It was amazing. Thank you for your time also, and thank you for what you're doing with the show.
Awesome. Thank you. I want to remind everybody to like, follow, and share. Help us spread the word.